that it's no longer like I have to put on this show and make sure that, the other person likes me to, achieve this goal, right? Like whatever that is, like, it's more like, all right, like I really reached this place of acceptance and love within myself. And I just am showing up as my, this authentic, genuine version of myself and going to try and have a good time. I see people put so much pressure on themselves. And again, I harken back to what I said earlier about like why we don't want to get in the pen pal stage, because if you've been talking to someone for 6 weeks, a month, 3 weeks, whatever, on an app, and then you go to the date, it's like, oh my God, there's just so much more pressure around it. So I think if we can just look at it as like, all right, this is going to be an hour of my life, and it is an opportunity to get to know like someone else and, their life experiences. And maybe it's going to be a match, maybe it's not. And like, we'll keep it moving.
Welcome to the Relationship Psychologist podcast.
Tune in every Thursday to learn with us as we interview experts.
And laugh with us as we banter about friendship.
And take action by implementing the tools and advice we provide to you each week to level up your personal relationships.
I'm Dana Mullen.
And I'm Alicia Hinger.
We are soul sisters, besties, and psychologists on a mission to change the culture of relationships.
Your journey to becoming more supported and connected starts
right now.
Nice to meet you officially, or see you officially.
Yeah, no, really nice to see you too.
Yeah, how you feeling?
Large, but outside of it.
Aww, how many months are
you? About a little past 7 months. So, a lot of movement, a lot of kicking, rolling around, all that good stuff. But it's exciting.
It's so fun. So exciting.
Oh, it is.
Okay. Nicole Walker is a licensed counselor and relationship coach. After years of unsuccessfully navigating the dating landscape herself and knowing firsthand how hard it can be to form healthy relationships, she went on to found Renovate Your Relationships. Her company offers courses and personalized coaching and has become a trusted guide for modern adults who want to find and keep the love they deserve without shame, stigma, or confusion. In her spare time, you can find her baking, binging Bravo, and spending time with her husband and 2 pups in upstate New York, and soon to be baby.
Yes, soon to be baby. Couple more months.
What do you binge watch? Now I'm curious.
All the Real Housewives. I love them all. Southern Charm, Below Deck. I just think, I'm sure you guys can relate, but like being therapists, at the end of the night, I just need like some easy TV.
Oh, it's so
That's so Dana.
Nicole, we're the same.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like if we do watch something, I'll say to my husband, like, let's watch something. And he wants something that is like meaningful and like where he's going to think critically.
That's me.
And I'm like, I want something that is so dumb or like, just like, brainless. Like I just want to just sit and I just
entertain me.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk. I just want to relax.
Yes, totally. Or love like a good baking show. That's what I need. We're on the same level with that.
Yeah, that's funny.
Awesome. And quick question, what kind of dogs do you have?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I have one of them's in here with me. We have a rescue Shih Tzu named Gary.
Gary. That's adorable.
Yes. And quick funny story about him. When we adopted him, they told us he was 12 years old. So we thought, we're doing this good deed of getting this senior dog. And then we brought him to the vet afterwards. They're like, this dog is like 5 years old. So it was a big shift. I mean, obviously we're happy we have him for longer, but yeah, we couldn't believe it. And then our other dog, Oliver, he's like a Spaniel Bichon Frise mix. So
cute and little. You have cute little dogs.
Yes.
They're very cute.
Well, you have a cute little dog too.
I do too. Yeah. She's got big dogs. I'm a small dog kind of girl. So
yeah. You guys are the same.
Binge
watch the same shows, little dogs. I got big dogs and I want big drama. Or Game of Thrones. I want big thriller shows that like blow my mind with dead things and dragons and all the stuff. Okay, so, we digress.
Yes. Okay. Let's get back on topic. So Nicole, tell us a little bit about you as a therapist. You do lots with and as a coach, guiding people in the dating scene. So I'm curious, first off, like how would you start with a new client? Like if somebody comes in and they're wanting to get into the dating scene, what would kind of be a process maybe that you would do with them?
Yeah, so I think right off the bat, something that can be really, really helpful is to identify I like to call it like your patterning. And what I mean by that is I think like when you enter the dating scene, and I experienced this firsthand, which is why I'm, so passionate about helping other people, is I think like we think we know what we want. We think we know like, oh, this type of person will be good for us. And then it's like, why aren't I in the type of relationship that I want? Like, what's going on here? So I think like that initial step really needs to be like, okay, like what kind of relationships were modeled to me growing up? When, what words do I associate with the word love? In my home, when someone said, I love you, like, what did that mean? What behaviors and actions were associated with that? Right. So really kind of like going deep to identify like what you're bringing to the table as far as what you observed and what your subconscious scripts are about love. And I think that can be really informative because then you can make an educated decision around like, okay, do I want to repeat that? Or is that something that I want to be really aware of? And maybe pick different people, and what do those people look like? And I think with that knowledge comes kind of like this little like brain pretzel that like, even though like I'm really attracted to this person, I now know that's going to be no good for me. And my subconscious is just attracted to that because it feels familiar and safe. But this person over here that maybe I'm not as excited about from the jump, they might actually be a really good match for me. And maybe I need to tweak what I'm doing a little bit to give that a little more time to grow.
Yeah. So deep dive right from day one.
Yeah.
That's deep. Those are hard questions for people. Or do you find they are that when they're coming in and they're like, I keep dating the wrong person, or I'm in these same cycles, or whatever, whatever their concerns are. Do you find that's hard for them to switch gears and ask? Like, those are hard questions you just asked. Profound, good questions.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we definitely do it over some sessions. I'm not, I get that diving right into the deep end. But I also think, as a therapist and coach, like, let's get into it, right? Like there's no need to waste time. Yes, of course you want to build that rapport and trust with the client, but I find for most people by the point in time they get to me, like they are so fed up with themselves and other people and the dating world. They're just like, hit me with it. Like, what am I doing wrong? Or, conversely, which can be a really interesting conversation, is when people come to me and it's like everyone else's fault, right? Like, well, everyone out there in the dating world is just, they're ghosting me and they're awful and no one can communicate and no one's emotionally mature and, all these things. And it's like, okay, well, maybe some of your experiences led you to feel like that's true, but like let's look at the type of people you're picking, because I think it's so important to keep bringing it back to you, because you can only control you, right? You can't control all these other people on the dating apps.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Love all those points. Those are all really good points that you just gave for sure. What do you think are kind of some of the biggest challenges people come in with? And let's say that they start with that and they're starting to understand, like you said, their picker, so getting clear what their picker and what they're bringing to the table. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you see with your clients that are like maybe new to dating or maybe new back into dating? Because it's a different world. Yes. I mean, I'm old, so it's a different world than when I dated.
Yes. So many. Where do I begin? I think one of the most popular is I think that people have kind of like a love-hate relationship with the dating apps, and that can be like a difficult landscape to navigate. And I think what a lot of people do that I see is they go in really hot and heavy and they're like, I'm going to go on 2 dates a week and talk to all these people. And then they get burned out really fast. And I really encourage people to slow down a little bit, be a lot more intentional about kind of like understanding within themselves, like, this is what I'm looking for. Like, this is what I want in a relationship, to have more of like a guide for your picker, like you said, right? Instead of just like, kind of going out with anyone. And I think the other part of that is I see a lot of people make the mistake of they start messaging someone and now they have a 6-week long pen pal. Like, what are we doing? Right? This isn't helping anyone. Like, get it off the app, meet in person as quickly as possible. Like, yes, you want to develop a little like rapport and trust with someone, right? You want to feel safe, like all of those things. But I think that, in person can feel so different than messaging someone back and forth. And I've gotten that complaint from so many people. It's like, oh God, this is so time consuming. I feel like I'm wasting so much time because I'm talking to these people and then the dates go nowhere. And it's like, well, okay, well, let's frame how you're approaching this a little bit and maybe spend a little less time on that getting to know you stage over the app and a little more of that in person.
Yeah, I love that. I love the map. You offer the map of like, here's a better way to do this. Here's a better map to follow or better ideas to follow. I love that.
Yeah. And it is these dating apps right now. It seems like so many people that I've even had as clients that have said it feels dishonest. It feels almost like shopping is kind of a complaint I've heard, where it's like, oh, I can find something better. I can just keep swiping and I can find, like, I don't have to be committed to you. But as you're saying, like, get in person as quick as possible. I really like that advice for people that, and maybe even curious if there is any apps that you have found maybe that are better than others. I don't know if you have any preference or from what you've heard from clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my clients really seem to like Hinge and Bumble. Those are like the two names that come up again and again. But I guess I would also say, to piggyback off of that, like, spread out your strategy, right? Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So that's kind of what I see, or a mistake I see some people make too, is like, oh, I'm just going to do the apps. Like, how about when you're waiting in line at the bagel shop and there's the cute guy in front of you and you guys are just standing there for 20 minutes, right? Like, or your friends, like, letting them know, hey, I'm single. Like, if you hear of anyone or know of anyone, like, I'm available, putting yourself out there. So I think, like, that's another part of it too. Like, yeah, the apps are great, but they're not everything. Right. And, of course, in an ideal world, to have the chance to meet someone organically, you get to kind of bypass some of those steps with an app where you already know if you're physically attracted to them, if there's some kind of connection, what their voice sounds like, what it feels like to be in a room with them, and how your nervous system reacts to that, right? Like, all those important things. So I think, you're really doing yourself a disservice if you think like, oh, I'm just going to only put 100% of my energy into the apps, when there's really other things that you could be exploring. Like, I have a client right now who joined a running club and is meeting people that way. And, that strategy might take a little more time, right? Because we've discussed, like, with an app, why everyone's on there. Like, they're ready for a date. Where meeting people organically, you're going to become friends first, right? Like, you're not going to meet someone and that night be like, hey, you want to go get a drink? I mean, maybe you could, but that'd be an aggressive approach, right? But yeah, like, I think my takeaway there.
Yeah, like the slow, more organic foundation. Do you feel like in today's world that foundation, that slow build to the foundation, people are impatient? Do you find people are more impatient because they have so much choice, because there are these apps and they can be like, this is taking too long, or maybe I'm anxious and I don't want to, I'm nervous to ask you for a first date, so go back to the apps, or I'm on a date with you, did the running club, now we're on a date and I like you and you're pretty good. Like, I'm looking at my criteria list that we've made with Nicole and you're pretty good. But now I'm like, but I also have a criteria list that my app maybe have better ones. But there's always this distraction, or maybe this distraction back to what else is out there, because the pool is so big now.
Yes, no, totally. And it's like, what you were mentioning before with like the paradox of choice, research tells us that more choices does not necessarily make us happier.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I really encourage people to go back to that, like, slow down, be intentional about what you're looking for, because it can get just like so overwhelming with all of these choices and thinking like, oh, I want the bigger, better deal. And maybe there's something, better here. But I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking like, oh, you're trying to find the perfect person, No, you're trying to find a person who has similar values and life goals and has a growth mindset that you can build something with, right? Like you're not looking for like this house that's already perfectly decorated and made. You're looking for like a solid plot of land that you could build a really nice house on, if that metaphor makes sense.
That's a perfect metaphor. Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
Yeah. I love that. I love it.
That's your metaphor.
Yeah, it's kind of very similar. I always tell my clients, I'm like, you're not looking for an ideal person. You're looking for an ideal relationship that you want to co-create with somebody. So you're looking for a partner. Like if you want to start a business, like building houses, you want a partner that is going to help create that vision. We want to be aligned on what we want to build together. So you really are trying to find some alignment with another person that it feels like we want to co-create the same thing together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great visual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about when I find that there are certain clients that I've worked with as well that feel like they've been out there dating for so long that they just feel done. Like they just feel completely like worn out. They feel like the dating pool is horrible and they just have kind of that mindset. Do you find that you have a lot of clients that come in like that? And if you do, what do you recommend for them?
Yeah, no, and I think that is a place that a lot of people find themselves in. And I think that when you're at that stage, it's also important to check in with yourself of like, all right, how am I showing up on the dates? Like if you're in that mindset of just being so burned out and done, are you going to the dates and bringing that like vibe with you, right? That you're just like annoyed and dejected, because like then that is going to tell me like, all right, we need to take a break. We got to kind of like recenter. Let's do some self-love and work on you. You know, obviously this isn't making you feel good right now. So let's take a step away from it. So I think like that would be the first part of that I would assess is just like, well, how is that vibe like carrying over to the dates, right? And for some individuals that I work with, it can be something as simple as a shift of like, I've only been using the apps and I'm feeling really burned out with the apps. Okay, well, let's take a break from the apps and let's try and meet people organically, or vice versa. They've never tried an app. They've only been, trying to meet people organically. And it's like, okay, let's dip your toe in, let's sign up for an app and let's just see how this goes. So I think, assessing like, how is my current feelings towards dating carrying over into these dates? And is it something as simple as like, I just need to switch up my strategy and inject some new energy into my dating that's going to make me feel a little more hopeful while still being able to accept and honor where I'm at and being okay with that, which I know is so hard.
Yeah, very hard. And maybe even too, like understanding, the why. Like, why do I want to be in a relationship again? Which kind of goes back to your idea of a map. So having a map for how I'm dating and how I'm picking, but also my why of what I'm looking for. Why am I looking for that? Like, why do I want to be in a relationship in the first place? Because that might put a bit of fire behind. If I really want something, I'm going to keep doing it, even though it gets hard.
Right. And I really look at it too, like the foundation of any relationship starts with the relationship that you have with yourself, right? So some people in that place I see are putting so much energy into like these other people, but are kind of like neglecting their relationship with their self, right? Or are going into these days with this mindset of like, I just so badly want them to like me. And it's like, whoa, hold on. Did you like them? Did you enjoy yourself? So really bringing it back to you and like, how is your relationship with yourself? Because that again is going to be a huge impact in, how you're dating.
Yeah. Or like you said, that vibe. Like if you walk in with that vibe, I mean, I work with horses, and if you bring a vibe like that to the arena, they feel you. They're like, whoa, what's happening? They feel that like neediness or that hard want. Like, I need this. I want this. It's, if I'm like, we got to go riding right now, my horses are like, not right now. Like they'll really quickly pull back. So imagine they feel it. Humans are going to feel it too, that, I need you to fill this bucket. I'm on this mission. I need you to, here's the application, fill it out. I need to hire someone today.
Yeah.
job opening.
Yeah. Job opening. It's been open for a long time. It is for sure. That energy, I just feel like that people bring to a date or the dating world of like, where am I in alignment with my own self? Like, do I stand for anything? Do I, if I go in, I'm not dating, but if I was, what are my values? What do I stand for? What am I looking for? Who am I? Like that relationship with me.
Yeah.
So when I go in there, I'm not trying to prove myself. I'm not even trying to be liked. I'm just trying to be me. So if you don't like me, then that's okay. Then I'll attract somebody who does like me, but just staying in that alignment of like, this is the relationship with myself first, and I'm going to show up as myself. And if you don't like me, then that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like that's so important for people to just be grounded in who they are before they're going out dating.
Yeah, like part of that map, like you were saying, that
Yeah.
part of that map is exactly knowing who you are, relationship with self first. I'm not going there to fill my half. I'm going there full to share my fullness with somebody else. Very different way of showing up on a date, like you said. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and think about how when you word it that way, like how much internal pressure I would hope that would take off of you, that it's no longer like I have to put on this show and make sure that, the other person likes me to, achieve this goal, right? Like whatever that is, like it's more like, all right, like I really reached this place of acceptance and love within myself, and I just am showing up as my this authentic, genuine version of myself and going to try and have a good time. I see people put so much pressure on themselves. And again, I harken back to what I said earlier about like why we don't want to get in the pen pal stage, because if you've been talking to someone for 6 weeks, a month, 3 weeks, whatever on an app, and then you go to the date, it's like, oh my God, there's just so much more pressure around it. So I think if we can just look at it as like, all right, this is going to be an hour of my life, and it is an opportunity to get to know like someone else and, their life experiences. And maybe it's going to be a match, maybe it's not. And like, we'll keep it moving.
Yeah. I'm just learning, right? I'm just like learning as I go. Yeah. I love that. I love that. What about communication? So again, I don't have like I watch my kids and they're Snapchatting and it's, picture of their side of their face, and that's how they communicate. And that is what they do. That's part of their world. But do you find like people that are dating now, because they have different ways of communicating when they get into the in-person? So you're like, go in person quick, which I love that you say that. But when they get to in-person quick, are they coming back with struggles to you? Like, I don't know how to communicate, or I don't know how to talk at a dinner table, or are they struggling with, are they pick up their phone and be like, I just need to look at my phone to get ideas, or I don't know. Do you find that people struggle with communication?
I think some people struggle with communication in different ways. I think like one thing that I really encourage my clients to do is to be really upfront about what they're looking for, right? That's a method of communication. Yep. That can be right on your bio in the app, right? I'm not saying you need to come out like super strong and heavy, but like there should be some kind of discussion in the infancy of your communication with that person. Like, hey, I'm looking for a serious relationship, if that's what you're looking for, right? I think a lot of people kind of like hide their needs and wants because they want to be in a relationship so bad that they have this mindset of like, well, I'll just be whatever like you want to be. And then they end up as like, a hookup buddy or a situationship. And then they're like upset and they're like, how did I end up here? And it's like, well, you weren't upfront in the beginning about what you were looking for, right? Because then that gives the other person to be honest with you, for them to say like, oh, I'm looking for a serious relationship too. And it's like, awesome, we're on the same page. Or they can say, I'm just looking for something really casual. And then, now you have that information to make a more educated decision. But I think that, you want to start that framework of direct communication right from the beginning. Yeah. Even though it can feel scary and vulnerable to kind of put yourself out there. But I think that's part of it. I think, again, why meeting in person is important is because you don't want to get to know someone and talk about everything via texting or the app, because then you're going to get in person and it's like, what else do we have to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Like you've already talked about everything on the app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think, that, and I think that if you are someone who gets nervous about like, I'm going to go on this date and there's going to be awkward silences and I'm not going to know what to say. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a note on your phone that maybe you reference before the date if you're nervous. Like, what are some conversation topics, like thinking about like, have you seen any good movies lately? Do you like to read? What's the last great book that you read? Any travel plans? I mean, I'm just shooting from the hip, but you know what I mean? Like kind of that can make someone who runs a little bit more anxious feel a lot more at ease. And I always tell people, if all else fails, what people like to talk about more than anything is themselves.
Yeah.
True.
So just ask the other person about them and keep asking follow-up questions and you'll be good.
Yeah.
Very true. And you'll learn a lot. And your head, you're like checking off your list that you've made. You're like, check, X. Okay.
Yes, for sure. What about red flags, Nicole? Is there anything that you kind of prep your kind of clients with to be aware of when they're going on these dates?
Or the apps too, maybe.
Or the apps.
Yeah.
Good. Exactly.
Yes. I mean, and I think one thing that I'll say to preface what I'm about to share with red flags is I think there can be, especially in the dating world, like a lot of like fear mongering around like, look out for this and look out for this and don't date a narcissist and all this stuff. And again, if we bring it back to you really working on that relationship with yourself, well, you know what? You're going to be a good communicator. You're going to have solid boundaries. Like you're going to be able to navigate whatever comes at you, right? And you're going to be able to see if you've kind of been able to identify your patterning and this is what I want, this is what a healthy relationship looks like, and I'm looking for someone with secure attachment, then you're going to be able to notice right away when someone doesn't have those qualities, and you're going to be able to extricate yourself from the situation, right? So I think there's like so much fear around like, oh my God, I'm going to end up with like, this like love bomber or something. And it's like, okay, so what if you do? You're going to go on one date with them and then realize that and you'll get out of there.
Right? Because you're helping. You can say, that was great.
Yeah.
Not going to work out for us.
Yeah. Yes. I suppose that's the goal, obviously, of working with some of the people that you would work with is to kind of start to navigate their relationship with themselves to be more secure, because most of us don't come from a secure background. Right. So if we're looking at the population of people, the majority of people are coming from an insecure background. So if you had a client kind of come to you that was coming more from an insecure background, is there anything that you would kind of help with them to navigate, the relationship with themselves to create more security, I guess?
Yes. Yeah. So many things. I think, and when it comes to, dating, right? And how to like establish that security, I think like you want to show up in the way that you want other people to show up, right? So if you want to be paired with someone who's securely attached, well, we got to like work on you showing up as securely attached. So I think some things that I work on with clients are, again, like direct communication, not playing games, being able to set and maintain boundaries, but also being able to accept other people's boundaries, right? That's a huge one. So, going back to like those red flags, I think those are things that you can pick out really early on in the process and also practice yourself of, I'm not gonna, they texted me, I'm gonna wait 8 hours to text him back because like, I don't want to, seem too eager and, all that stuff. I'm going to like make the plan. I'm going to stick with it, right? Like that's a huge green flag in someone else is if their actions match their words, right? Like you have a date plan, they put forth some effort, they initiated, getting together, they show up on time. I mean, of course, there can always be extenuating circumstances to these things. And maybe there's horrible traffic, whatever. But even with that, how does that person navigate those bumps in the road?
Yeah.
Right? Are they apologetic and are they communicative about it? And does it not happen again? Or is it a pattern?
Yeah. Yeah. And noticing those things, like you said, noticing those patterns. And as you're knowing self and knowing the things you bring to the table, knowing what they're bringing to the table, that's their truth maybe too. That may not be a match for yours. So if you have your criteria, your map that you've created, then knowing that, I want kids and this person really doesn't, but man, they're really great. And I really like all the stuff about them, but that's going to be a deal breaker for me. And so like you said, being really honest early on that this is for me important, or I'm this religion and it's important to me, or whatever that thing is for you, that, having those criteria up front, being honest, like you said, up front, and not, because I think we see couples later on, been married 16 years, or they've been dating for, or they, whatever, for a long time. And I hear often, like even little things, like a couple that's smoking, and she says now they've been married for like 10 years. I just thought he would quit when we had kids. And I'm like, but did you tell him that? And she's like, no. And then he's in the room with him. I'm like, did you know? She's like, no. I'm like, didn't you quit smoking? He's like, no, I have no desire to. Like, that was never one of our deals. And so she's contemptuous about this smoking thing, but it was never talked about early on, or never pointed out as a deal breaker. So we see those later on in a relationship. So I like that point that you made of early on when you're dating, know what those are for you and say them up front. Hey, just so you know, if you're a smoker, that's a deal breaker for me. Don't just wait and be like, I hate it, but I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm going to keep that a secret from you. And 10 years later, I'm going to have resentment about that thing that I never said.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see that lots in our office. I don't see the daters. I see that married.
Yeah. Occasionally we see some more of the daters, not as much, but what I like also that you said, Nicole, or it made me think of when you were speaking, was that, another green flag could be somebody coming in and knowing what we would call their deficits, right? Like maybe some things that are challenging for them to say, you know what, I'm really uncomfortable with maybe emotion, or talking about my past, or my family, or my past relationships. I don't know, whatever it is, but just to be open and honest about that would be also, even though somebody's like, oh, I really want that, but what a nice green flag to be open and honest about it.
Someone that has authenticity, that done their work, to be able to speak their truth. Yeah. Fresh air.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And to add on to all of that, I think like it's so important to be clear about the difference between what your pet peeves are versus a deal breaker.
Yes.
Right? Because I think sometimes, and especially in people who are more avoidant attachment and like, no one's good enough and I got to find the perfect partner, you're like tossing people aside for like pet peeves where it's like, is this really like that big of a deal? You know what I mean? Or you have some people who really, really want that relationship and go into it. I see this all the time, hoping and thinking like, oh, well, eventually that'll change, or eventually that'll go away, or I'll be able to convince them to start drinking less, or convince them that they want a baby. No, that's not going to happen, right? Like, I think people fundamentally like do not change. Like that people can't change, but like they are showing you who they are in those beginning stages. And for you to just like put this glossy shine on it of like, oh, but like I'm going to fall in love with like this future version of them that like I hope comes to fruition, I think is just so unrealistic and setting yourself up for a lifetime of disappointment, and also really unfair to the other person, because the person's being open about who they are, and then you're going to constantly make them feel like who they are isn't good enough. And that's not a good way to start a relationship.
Yeah, so important. That's such valuable information you just said right there. Thank you. That's so great. For sure. That's a gem right there.
Yeah, definitely. Nicole, curious, what about having, when people are in the new dating scene or have been dating for a while, do you ever recommend that they kind of vet out this partner a little bit? Like, introduce them, or at what point would you kind of suggest, I guess, them introducing them to their friends or their family? And if there's some importance and value there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. But I think on that note, people ask the wrong question. And what I mean is you introduce people to your new boyfriend or partner or girlfriend or whatever. And what do you always ask? What did you think of them? Did you like them? Did you think they were cute? And instead, I think such a more salient question to ask is, how was I around that person? What did you think of that version of me that came out in front of that person? Right? Like, I'll never forget many moons ago. Like to think of myself as a pretty outgoing, my friends would say probably I'm pretty like goofy and crack jokes and stuff. And I was dating this one person, and my friend gave me feedback. We had left like a group dinner, and she said, Nicole, I've never seen you so quiet around someone. Like, you just were like very like meek. It was like this dim version of you. And that always stuck with me, because I was like, like, that's really interesting to get this feedback that like, what was it about this relationship that I had that like this was the version of me that was coming out, and was I okay with that? Was I happy about that? Well, like, no, right? Like, that's not really great feedback to get, that like you were this dimmed version of yourself. So that always stuck with me. So I think that's important to get feedback around that, because you can't always see that yourself. Like I would have never left that dinner and thought that. I thought like, oh, I'm just, my regular normal self. But asking people like, hey, what version of me came out around that other person? Or how do you think I acted? I think can be really, really telling.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then when do you tell your couples, your dating partners, to know when to go all in? Like when's that space? And this is like a magical question, I know, but when's that, what are those cues to look for when you're like, okay, at some point you can't be teetering in the dating land because that's not long-term safe and secure. So when do you know to put both feet in the boat and be like, okay, I'm all in?
Yeah, I think that's such an individual question for every couple. But I think that it should be a step that is not a surprise for either party, right? Like going back to that communication, I think you should be checking in all the time, right? Not to an excessive point, but just like checking in like, hey, giving that person positive feedback if you're really enjoying hanging out with them, letting them know that like you are excited to see where this goes, right? If you want to be exclusive with that person, sharing that like, hey, what do you think about us not seeing other people? I feel like I'm kind of at that place with you, right? But I think like a mistake that I see some people make is like they go on the first date with someone and then they're 3 months in and they're like, I have no idea where we are. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what we are. And it's like, why were we not having these conversations along the way, right? And a secure partner will do that.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is thankfully very secure, but I have struggled a lot with avoidant attachment in my own life. And prior to dating him, dated a lot of, emotionally unavailable men. And I remember when I was dating him, like it was just so refreshing because he was just like so forward and outright and it like threw me off. But he would just be like, I really like you. I'm excited to see where this goes. And I remember we'd only been together probably like 2.5 months. And we were going to his like holiday work party and he's like, would it be all right if I introduced you as my girlfriend? And I was just like, what is happening? Like I just wasn't used to it, but it was so refreshing for someone to just be like direct and to feel like I always knew where I stood with that person and that there wasn't this underlying anxiety of it's a mystery and I have to constantly work really hard to like prove myself or to pull that out of them.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Yeah, that's what I was heading towards with that question is exactly that so I love that you say like it's actually stepping stones along the way. It's not one big, okay, now I'm all in. It's all these little moments and times where you're clarifying, checking in, communicating well all the way through. And as you do that, every time it kind of releases that pressure. Every time it's a bit safer, a little more secure, a little less resource. I'm not spending so much resources trying to check in. I'm safer, more secure. So I can actually be more resource, be my authentic self. Like you're like, your husband's like, I like you. You're my girlfriend now. Yeah, I love that.
Aww. I love your little story. I want to hear a little bit more, but I want a quick question I want to ask. Because it sounds like with your husband, it was very different. What were your friends, when they gave you the feedback of the other guy that you were really kind of like quiet and kind of not yourself? What was the feedback you got from your friends when you were with your now husband?
Yeah, well, it's funny. So to give you guys a little more background, so I met my husband on an app. I met him on Bumble. And our first date, we went out, and afterwards, I thought he was nice and everything, but I thought he was kind of boring, right? And that's something that I hear from a lot of people too. It's like, because if you are used to that insecurity, you want like the hot and heavy, right? Like right in the beginning, the spark. And then we know that's usually not sustainable and doesn't really work, the slow burn. So I had that in the back of my head, but I remember I left the date and I was like in the car and called my friend and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go out with him again. He was kind of a snooze and, he just all this stuff, talked about work, and my friends are great, and they were like, Nicole, give him another chance and did it. And we went on another date and we had a blast. And, he had ended up sharing on that second date. He was like, oh God, I was like so nervous. I feel like I talked about work so much. And, it was just very like endearing. But, as time went on and eventually it got to the point of introducing him to my friends, I got that feedback, to answer your question, like, wow, you're so yourself. That's what you want to hear. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's what you're
Like
looking
they
for.
didn't, right. They didn't feel like I was putting on a show or like trying to be someone that I wasn't. Not that I think anyone intends to do that, right? But sometimes you find yourself doing that, with certain people.
Well,
So
it goes back, like you said, it goes back to those old stories of not knowing self. And so when we're in relationship, we're triggering old memories and now we're showing up as something maybe that's unfinished. If you don't know what that is, you don't know, you're unaware of it. It's, biological. So I think that's what you said at the beginning, was doing that work individually is so important. But I love your friend's feedback of you're so yourself. And you're like, I know who that is. Yay.
right. That's what we want. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was good.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's so true. I mean, if you don't, I feel like dating is kind of this thing that back in the day, I used to always say it's kind of like a buffet, which I don't think they have buffets anymore since COVID, but there used to be buffets where like you could go and you could try different things. And I felt like dating was like that. You have to get out there and you have to try different types of people maybe that you weren't inclined to even move towards, to be able to go, okay, what feels right for me? Like where do I feel most myself? And I love that you also said the thing about the boring, because secure. I mean, we always say this to our couples.
Secure is boring sometimes.
It is. It's safe. It's predictable.
Yeah.
It's, I know that I can come home to you and I know there's not going to be any uproar. I mean, if there is, we can handle it, but there's just this sense of like, I can be me in your presence and you can be you. And there's no fake, there's no acting. It's just,
If you're, like you said, if you're looking for that fire, secure could feel very, what was words you used? Snoozy. Snooze. I loved it. It could be very snoozy. Yeah. It's also that's what secure is. It feels calm. It feels landed. It feels like home. But that's Esther Perel's talk, right? When she talks about, I want to be this safe, secure space, but also be my fire. And how do you do the both? Well, that's the work. That's actually the fun of long-term relationships, is being, in co-creation with someone, doing that playful work of like, we're snoozy because we want to be snoozy in this really secure, safe space. Well, let's also be fiery over here. And how do we do that? How do we, create that? About the talk, but it's fun.
Yes. Yeah, which I think is so important and like something that you can explore together, right? From that like team mentality, but it can feel really nice to have that. And I think also, long-term relationships, I think like a lot of people think like, oh, once I meet the person, then like, going back to that example of like, oh, once I meet the perfect person, it'll be all set, instead of like this idea of we're like building the house from the foundation. That can be such a healing opportunity, even in and of itself, because like even with me, like I did so much work to try and reach a place of security within myself. But I even find myself now, and here I'm a licensed therapist, I teach other people how to do this. Like, even if we pick the right person, it can be so hard long term to not like project our stuff or try and like recreate that stuff, from our childhood, even in this really like secure relationship. For like me personally, like my big thing was like, I can do it all myself and I'm independent and I don't need anyone's help, and all. And I even find like if, I get in a fight with my husband, like that's one of my go-tos. And I have to constantly check myself and be like, Nicole, what is going on with this? Like, we gotta, work on this and heal this around you feeling like I'm putting up such a fight. Like, that's this little part of my like insecure attachment that like doesn't want to die.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because it's hardwired into your system. And then receiving his safety. When you're like, I got this, I can do it myself. And he's like, well, you can, but I'm also here for you. And to receive that from someone that's so secure is difficult at the beginning. I'm also avoidant. We're islands in recovery, if to use Stan's words. No longer islands, we're secure, but it's a forever recovery process of coming back to secure, because our blueprints are still hardwired into our system. So that's a big word that we use lots, as receiving in my house. And let me give you for you just to receive. And you're like, oh.
And Yeah. And I like even just this idea of, Nicole, you're talking about now, you were in the dating realm and now you are married, and that this work, and we tell our couples this, that your relationships they're high maintenance. So they're always going to be work, and there's going to be stuff that's going to pop up, but it's a journey together. It's not a destination. We're not just trying to find some perfect person that completes us. It's like we're on a journey of knowing each other and mastering each other.
And doing what you just said, the work that Nicole brought up, the work of, oh, in this fight we're having, or this situation we're in is triggering my stuff. This is the journey of me self-discovering and knowing me through you, through time and space. Wow, that's beautiful. Hard sometimes, but beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that you can really pick out and notice in someone from the jump, is like, does this person have a growth mindset? Are they going to grow with me and like tackle the tough stuff? Or do they have a fixed mindset and feel like, no, this is who I am. Like, I don't think I need to grow. If there's a problem in our relationship, it's going to be your fault because I got to figure it out. And, when tough stuff happens, I'm going to bail, or I don't want to deal with it. Like, I'm in the process of getting certified as an imago therapist. So part of the training is you have to bring your partner to the weekend retreat. Like, you have to do it. And this was, I feel like as therapists, it's always so funny. 9 times out of 10, I find we marry people who are like, therapy, like they're just like,
totally.
Like,
and then we drag into all of our stuff, and they're like, rolling their eyes. Our husbands feel that pain for sure.
But I think like this was such a good example of like what we're talking about with that growth mindset. Like, my husband would probably be rather be doing anything else than being go to a 3-day like kumbaya, let's hold hands and stare in each other's eyes and talk about our feelings. But he's doing it, for me, and he's open to it. So I think like that's all you can ask.
Yes.
I can't ask him to be like pumped for the weekend, but just the fact that he's willing to do it, like, you really want someone who's going to have an open mindset and be willing to grow with you like that.
Yeah, that's so true. So fun. So true.
That is.
All right. If you could, this was the question I asked you this morning. If you could distill all your amazing thoughts and ideas and advice, this is an impossible question, but what's if you distill it down to like if you had one sentence to say that was like this is Nicole's advice to the world. What's your one distilled down piece of advice? Let's go with dating.
Yes. She's like shocked.
On what? Yeah.
Just on dating.
It's a pressure question. We should change that question.
Yes. Yeah. No pressure. Well, I thought about it, and I think that one thing that can really change the game for people, like a mindset shift, is to remember that it's always the system, not the symptoms, that are the problem. Right? So when it comes to dating, when it comes to relationships, I think people get so hung up on like, my partner, does this, or, this like little minutia symptom, or, they drank too much last weekend. And it's like, okay, well, like, what is the system, right? How are you guys communicating? How are you interacting? Same with dating. How's your relationship with yourself? How are you showing up on these dates? What is your system and map for meeting new people and, all of these things? How are you preparing for the dates, right? Versus I think people get so hung up on like, oh, everyone out there sucks, or, my husband doesn't help out with the household chores. Well, all of those things are a product of the system. So if you look at working on the system, well, then the symptoms are going to change. I hope that makes sense, but I think that can be really helpful.
That's our language. We say, get out of content, get out of content. People come in with all their content, and I'm like, pause. Do you see how you're communicating? Do you see what's happening in the room? Get out of content. They want to tell you their stories, and they're interesting. And it's like a car accident. I want to see what's happening too, but why did it happen? Well, who wasn't looking where they were going? What wide angle first? So that's bang on. That's exactly what we'd say.
Yeah. I love your language that you just said, like the system, because that includes the person now, right? Where it's like, stop pointing fingers and looking everywhere else. Like, you're part of that system. So look at it that way. Yeah. That's great advice.
So you're both accountable. I love that. Great.
Yes, no, totally. And that is so hard as a couples therapist. Oh, I give you guys so much credit because you want to get in there and be like, they said what? And like hear the whole story. But it's like none of that matters. And if you go into a couple session and just rehash your fight for 40 minutes, which I hear from so many clients, that's what their couples therapy sessions look like, which is such a shame.
Yeah.
It's like, we're not getting anywhere, right? We're stuck in the content, like you said, and we're not looking at the system and like, how did we get here? And like, what are the undertones? Because like the minutia of, John didn't empty the dishwasher, that doesn't really have anything to do with anything.
Yes, exactly. And it's pissing you off because there's a bigger system at play here that you're not aware of. So, okay, if I can distill on that, I think anybody listening that's dating, do the renovations. What's it called? Renovate your relationship. Like learn how to do the dating stuff because that sets the foundation. That's buying the land. Let's buy the property land that looks really good. And then early on, do this work so that you're not in our office 16 years later having a broken system that you didn't pay attention to or fix in the first place. And if you're in it, come see us. We'll help you fix the system. But if you can do it early on, that'd be really great. Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
And I don't know if there's anything else that I want to just open it up for you, Nicole. Is there anything else that you want to share? Any piece of advice or anything else that you want to share with the audience?
Oh, yeah, that's an open-ended question.
Yes.
Well, I guess the one last thing that I'll share is I think relationship work is so hard and it is going to benefit you immensely if you can be kind to yourself in this process, right? Because I think so many of the reasons that we struggle in dating and end up with poor partners or we're constantly fighting with, our spouse or our significant other is because there's this wound here and all of this is coming out as a way to keep you safe. So I think like that's such a better way to relate with those things that you don't like about yourself that you're trying to change is like, how can I really honor and have compassion for this part of myself that it is working really hard and bringing this stuff up because it feels unsafe, right? And that's a lot easier to interact with if we can be kind and compassionate with ourselves as we navigate this, because relationships are such a foundation of our life, right? I mean, that's what happiness researchers find is like the number one predictor of happiness is our relationships and ability to connect with others. So we all want it, but to no fault really to anyone, a lot of us struggle with it. So let's be kind to ourselves as we all kind of, work on this together.
Yeah, beautiful. And just to mimic back to your map idea too, I think this might be a little plug for, therapists, but there's so many good therapists on Instagram and on, whatever platform you're on. There's so much good advice. But there's all sorts of bad advice. So for me, I'm always with my couples. I'm like, be mindful of what you're reading, be mindful of where you get information from. So yeah, listen to, your TikToks, whatever you're listening to, but look at who they are and like, look at your page and be like, oh yeah, she knows what she's talking about. Look at her stuff. She's licensed. She knows what she's doing. I would take that advice. So just be mindful of the advice you're taking and where you're getting it from, because it is a complex world. And that kindness, compassion will build faster if you're listening to good feedback and you're getting good resources and good maps. Maps are important, really, really important. And so I'd rather take a map from someone that knows how to make maps. That's a little plug.
Yeah.
Yes.
You.
Yeah. No, and the last thing I'll say on that, because I know we can talk about relationships all day long, but even when you're dating or in a relationship, being so mindful of who you are taking advice from, right?
Yes.
Like who you're quote unquote following and like getting feedback from, like I work with people sometimes and they're like, oh, I'm telling so-and-so about my dates and so-and-so about my dates and today. And it's like, you want to be getting advice from someone who has a relationship that you would want to emulate and want to be in yourself. Like that person who's single and like is the, man hater and man suck and like, let's be single. And like, maybe if your goal is to be in a serious relationship and you're really putting in the work, maybe that's not the best person to get feedback from on your dates if they're in a completely different life stage, so I think that's so important.
Yeah. You talk about having master couples, like who is a master couple in your mind that you can look up to and ask questions to and, that can mentor you, same idea. So if you're dating, who in your life has dated or is dating, is doing it well, that you can look up to, that can mentor you. Yes. That's really, really important.
I love that.
Yeah. Really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Get good guides. There's lots of guides out there.
Yeah.
So get good ones for sure. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on here. It was really great.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah. You speak our
Yeah,
language.
thank you so much for having me. I really I love talking about this stuff. So I really appreciate this time we were able to share.
Us too. And we'll have you back on maybe post baby and how relationships have changed post baby.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be a doozy. I'm sure I'll have more to share.
We can mentor you. My babies are 19 and 16, so they're really old. So I remember those days. It's beautiful and chaotic at the same time. Yeah. Beautiful chaos.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with everything. And thank you again for coming.
Yeah, I really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Take care, Nicole.
See you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We're really glad you're here with us on this journey.
The best way to support this podcast is to subscribe and give it a 5-star review.
See you next time.
This has been a Bread Dog Studios production.